uh, and the meeting's being recorded. So, I know you know something about the MQE program, but I'll just let you know we are just finishing up our first session. So we divide our semesters each into 2 sessions. And so on Monday and Tuesday of next week, all of the students will be taking their exams, their final exams from both Luca Rogati and Kevin Shaver in our quantitative analysis and our sort of economic theory tracks. And then they'll be translating to Claire, and I can never get her last name right. It's a beautiful French last name. And to Richard Van Velden, where they're going to be switching into, they've been looking at sort of basic economic stuff and at sort of classical statistics. They're getting ready to translate into focusing on game theory on the theory side and more modern causal inference methods on the statistics and econometric side. And now they're also in the middle of a semester-long course on communications taught by Marilyn Nixon. So that's going great. We are primarily meeting in person. So 10 of the students are meeting in person every day in POSVAR.
That's awesome. That's great.
Are coming in via Zoom. And so I get to campus once a week or so, and it's just always so awesome to actually see students in the classroom.
Right.
And I can actually report that POSVAR Hall is full of undergraduate students now. It's kind of freaking me out. You guys are seeing it too, right? When you're there, it's like, where'd they all come from? So the program's going well, and we're transitioning out of our first session. It's going great, and I can report that the faculty feels like the students are doing really well and working really hard, and so that's great. So I get to introduce Mason. So Mason is one of our own. He graduated summa cum laude from Pitt with a BS in economics and statistics, which is awesome. And for some reason, got a minor in sociology, but that's not true. Some of my best friends are sociologists. As an undergraduate, he did an internship with the Downtown Community Development Corporation. And along with being a student in the MQE program, he's a research and policy intern at the RIDC of Southwestern Pennsylvania. So I was thinking about you today, Mason, when I was in a meeting with another one of our advisory board members who runs the data, essentially all things data for Allegheny County.
Very cool.
Katie's going to be in for a career chat down the road. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Mason, who is it's in your able hands to take us through our journey.
All right, great. Well, it's really nice to virtually meet you, Andy. Thank you for being with us. For everybody in the class, I thought that the best way to do this would be that if you have any questions that pop up that aren't in the outline, that you don't think will already get answered, feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have extra time at the end, we'll try to go back and talk about some of them. So just as a brief introduction for Andy, he graduated from Penn State with a BS in accounting before coming to the University of Pittsburgh for his MBA in marketing and finance. Over the years, he's worked as a CFO for a number of companies, Internet Securities Inc., Storm, Internet Ventures Works, and has taught as an adjunct professor at both Pitt and CMU. Currently, he's the co-founder, chairman, and chief partnership officer of Othot, a software company that helps higher education organizations use prescriptive models and other advanced analytics to improve their enrollment, their student success, their postgraduate success, and their alumni connections. So I wanted to start off with a couple questions just about your professional background and journey. So when you were in college, what made you decide to pursue studies in finance and accounting?
I didn't see that one on the outline, by the way.
Yeah.
That's funny. You know, I was a history major, and my parents sat me down. I'm a first-gen college goer, and they said, "What in the heck are you going to do with a history major?" I said, "I'm going to go into politics." And they said, "Okay, well, what if that doesn't work out?" I said, "I don't know, I'll teach." And they said, "No, you don't want to teach." And so, which is ironic because that's what I love to do now. So my brother was in accounting. So they said, "Hey, go into accounting. Your brother's in accounting." So that's how I ended up in accounting, believe it or not. So it was not a passion that I had. My passion's history, which is still a huge passion of mine. But it was a great launching point because it taught me all the basics of how companies run. And I worked for a great firm called Deloitte. and it was a great start to my career. So really got me off on, even though it wasn't what I thought I ever wanted to do, it got me off on a great start.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to turn it over to Charles for the next question about your just about your background and journey.
Sure.
Oh, hi, I'm Charles. And so I've seen that you've had quite a bit of experience with starting and running businesses, like over the past couple of decades or so, and you also teach entrepreneurship at here at the business school. And I was kind of wondering how you came up with all the ideas for these businesses, and and I guess any advice on successfully executing the business plans that you've come up with.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing when you look at somebody's LinkedIn profile, you only see the ones that work. So the first business I tried to start was a round beach towel company, because I used to go to the beach a lot, and I used to think, why in the heck are they square? You want to turn with the sun. We should make them round. That flopped. Then I wanted to start a diaper delivery service back when the green eco thing started back in the late 1980s, and that flopped. And there's about 2 or 3 other ones that were more high tech related. But I think what's important about your early career in terms of building companies is that when you or a friend has a good idea and you pursue it, that you try and you fail, because failure teaches the best lessons. The one company that is on my LinkedIn that failed is a company called Internet Venture Works. And it failed for lots of different reasons, but the main one was it was a crash of the internet bubble. But I learned more about taking that company apart and ripping it apart than I did building it. So even in failure, you can learn tremendous things. But the ideas, I like to come up with ideas. Someone like Othot was my idea, but other ones like internet securities was somebody else's idea. And I think intellectual curiosity, which is which will play into another one of your questions later, but intellectual curiosity is one of the most critical things to being an entrepreneur. You want to understand how something works, or why there's a problem, or how can we do it better. So I've always been stimulated by that. So either my own ideas or my friends, and then you do enough, talking to others in the industry, and eventually you try to build a company. And I've been fortunate that a few of mine have worked out and some of them haven't. So I don't know, Charles, if I'm getting to sort of the answer that you're looking for, but please ask another probing question if I did not.
I think it answered it pretty well for now. Yeah, I actually have been considering running or starting a business at some point, but I just wasn't really sure what exactly I wanted to do though. But yeah, I thought that that the advice and the answer that you gave was pretty good though. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think this program is really doing a great job so far of promoting that kind of curiosity in us, and helping us make those connections for the future. I wanted to point out before we move on that I don't think Trisha's question in the chat, I don't think we are as a valid question. But,
very valid point to bring up.
No,
I know most of you want to pit, but
We're not starting this right now.
The answer to that question is Penn State, but I love playing both sides, right? I love being both a Penn State and a Pitt person. I'm a Pennsylvania person. I got taught at CMU, so I can wear lots of hats.
Yeah, I feel like you're obligated to play to kind of play both sides now, but but no, that's great.
Everybody knows there's always one favorite.
So I'll turn it over to Spencer now to ask the next question.
Hi, my question is kind of what was your inspiration with specifically serving the educational sector with your analytics company, and why you chose that sector instead of some other kind of sector?
Yeah, thank you for that. So when we started Othot, the whole idea was to democratize predictive and prescriptive analytics and make it affordable to any organization that they could um, leverage the benefits of that type of platform. And so, we immediately said, okay, well, what industry should we go after with this technology? And we explored a number of different ones. We explored industries. We explored auto dealerships. We explored museums. We explored, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the day, as we talked to different organizations about the problems that they were facing and how they were trying to solve them, it kept coming back to us that higher education was um, had some real problems with finding the best fit students at the right price that will persist and graduate, get good jobs, and remain engaged as alumni. That continuum is tailor-made for an AI platform, an ML platform, because you're learning about a person from the day that you meet them and their behaviors, from the day you meet them until the day that they die, right? And what you want to do is you want to optimize that relationship between the two, between the individual and the institution. So if you can learn about somebody and what they're interested in, what motivates them, the student benefits, whereas I'm not, and also if I can charge you the right price, you're not going to graduate with a degree that can't earn enough money to repay your debt. So there's all these really good ways of optimizing a relationship between the two, and AI and machine learning platforms can teach us about how to optimize that relationship. I think we got started because of, in higher education, because of my background in higher education in terms of teaching at CMU at the time. Well, it was actually a little bit before then, but also that I sat on boards, and I was always been very, education is one of my sort of hobbies. So it was a natural to explore it. And anytime when you go to somebody and you say, hey, we got this idea, are you interested? And 2 or 3 people go, yes, immediately. And then you ask the first one, say, okay, I don't have anything, but would you pay for it? And they said yes. And they said, how much are you going to charge me? And I go back and I say $40,000. And they say, yeah, we can do that. That's a good indication that there's at least, maybe it's one data point, but it's a good start to knowing that there's enough pain that somebody is willing to invest in that concept. So that's essentially how we got sort of found our way, but we tested other industries. So it wasn't like it was the only one.
Awesome, thanks.
Certainly.
All right, great. Well, all right, I'll turn it over to Jacob then for the next question.
Hi. So I know for at least myself, finding a career that I enjoy is a big deal for me. I don't want to do something that I don't like doing. And I noticed that you've done a lot of things over the years. So was it difficult finding an industry that you were passionate about? And what advice could you give us for finding a career that we can enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wow. That's the core of your question is really about self-discovery. I mean, for you to hit the industry that you're interested in your first try, it's such an anomaly. Occasionally that's a great dinner conversation. I'm 55 years old, and I sit around with my friends, and we all talk about where we started. I started as an accountant. And not that there's anything, if there's any accountants on, that if that was your background, no problem. But that doesn't, necessarily fit who I am today. I would never have survived and been happy at an accounting firm long term. But it's an important building block. So I think there's this. I've always been interested in the creation of new things. Whether I created a not-for-profit organization when I graduated from college. I created a student-run credit union when I was at school. These are, I wanted to be involved in new product development at Deloitte. And you really don't recognize the patterns until, after you do 3, 4, 5 of those, and you go, there's a pattern here. I like the creation of new things. And you have to leave yourself open to sort of listening to that. And I think one of the issues for young people generally or everybody, even when I was sort of at your stage of career, it was always, I wanted to know, what is it? Where is that industry? What is that company? What is that job? You know, and it's so infrequent that it just comes to you. So my advice really is to allow yourself to relax a little bit. Don't pull the trigger too soon. If I didn't spend whatever it was, 5 years at Deloitte, I would never have built the asset that I built, my understanding of how businesses work. And I think that's so be patient a little bit. Don't just jump because you're unhappy. You know, you can still learn when you're unhappy, and you will be unhappy in some jobs. It's just the way life is, or with your boss, or whatever. But it's in those times you keep your ears open and opportunities open up to you. And I was so foolish when I was young that I kept getting calls from recruiters, and they kept asking me, do you know anybody who might be interested in this job? I was so naive that I did not realize that they were actually asking me if I'd be interested in that job. You know, so my ears weren't open at that time, but that's, you know, I think that I learned that. It's just like, okay, make sure you learn from where you are, but keep your ears open, because these opportunities, they appear because of your interconnections with others.
That's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I mean, especially for us, I mean, given the nature of this program, it's only an 8-month program. So I feel like we just started, but, you know, really soon, within the next couple of months, we're kind of going to be starting that process of getting out there for a lot of us for the first time, going into the workforce and kind of starting that journey. So yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to transition now into some more technical questions, just about some of the methods that you've used throughout your career. So this is a little bit of a loaded question, but could you tell us a little bit about the delivery of your product to the customers? So what are some of the common mistakes that your clients, universities, make when interpreting the insights you provide? Or in other words, how do you make your complex models interpretable to somebody without technical knowledge?
Yeah, I would say that's probably the hardest thing about what we do, and what any company that is very technically and product driven does, which is, how do you make it easy for the customer to use your product? And because, you know, we hire really smart people that know 10 times as much as I do about data science and ML, and they create these unbelievable algorithms that are incredibly performant. And the problem is that when you're so good at that, you tend to try and tell everybody all the great things that it does, when the person on the other side, they just want a solution to their problem, right? So you have to figure out, like, you know, this is going to sound bad, but, you know, I have this thing that I say in our company, we need to hire more dumb people. And that doesn't mean that, well, we need less intelligent people. What it means is that we get inside ourselves too much, and we debate about the performance of models and how to do. And sometimes you forget that the person that's buying your product doesn't care. What they care about is, I have problem A, B, and C, and how are you going to solve my problem? So in that case, we are actively trying to fix this problem, which is, when we sell to a university, understand what the 3 biggest pains or goals are. Ask them how they're solving that now, and how that's going for them. Because guess what? If it's going really well and it works, you're not going to sell them anything. However, more than likely, it's not working very well. Just take a look at what's going on in higher education. And in general, you know, discount rates are going up, and, you know, number of enrolled students are going down. So you can say, okay, the problem is you're solving the problem in an archaic way. You know, and you can say, AI and machine learning helps us understand the individual like we never have before. which allows us to then intimately know somebody and know what's going to motivate them to enroll or to persist or to get a job or whatever it may be. And then you can give them a case study and give them a demo and show that exactly. So creating a bright line from the problem to the solution without talking about the AI and the machine learning, other than that's why it works so well. So did that?
Yeah. So, I mean, would you say, I mean, when you're working with these data and you're finding insights, if you find insights to questions that they didn't even know they had, have you found that that's information that universities are typically interested in, or do they just want the quick answer? I mean,
so you're falling into the trap, Mason. You know, because yeah, I mean, that's what we love to do. We love to find the other 5 problems that you have, not answer the 3 that you know you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you get into trouble. And this is a common issue, and believe me, we struggle with this every single day. But to make it easy, so we have a customer success group, and what they do is they try to teach the users to use the platform to solve the problems that they have. But sometimes they're not technical enough, you know, which means that we haven't made it easy enough for them to understand. You know, sometimes it's very complicated. I mean, this is an issue again that if you look at our product 5 years from now, my guess is it'll look completely different. The engine will be the same. It'll be a completely different body, right? If you think about it from a car perspective. But it is, you know, how you make it interpretable for the individual. You know, we work really hard with UX designers and UI designers, and just to make it easy, simple, dumb it down. Definitely the hardest way. And I think the best way to think about how do you learn about that skill set is storytelling, right? So problem, solution, how do you tell the solution as a story? And then how do you envision your product delivering that story?
Yeah, it's definitely tough, you know, because if your product is just telling people what's you know, what their problems are, then that's kind of a tough sell, I would think. But all right, so I wanted to turn it over to Keiko for the next question about advanced analytics.
Well, I think you're on mute, Keiko.
Oh, okay, thanks. I was reading through some of your writings and I saw that you were referring to advanced analytics. I was just wondering what kind of interactions and measurements do you consider to be advanced, and how does that set it apart from like typical metrics?
Yeah. So when we use the words so when we use the words advanced analytics, there's actually a relatively famous Gartner matrix, which has on the y-axis it has value, and on the x-axis it has difficulty. And it's 4 blocks that go up in a 45-degree angle, and at the bottom left is descriptive analytics, and then the next one up is diagnostic analytics. Those are what we would call table stakes, or those are basic analytics. They tell you what happened and why. Then you cross over that other 40, if you put an X, make it a 45-degree angle, you cross into the next 2 boxes, which is predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. That is what we call advanced analytics. So there's basic analytics, table stakes, which is diagnostic and descriptive, and then advanced analytics, which is predictive and prescriptive. And so you're using machine learning, or you're using AI, or whatever you're using to make a prediction. And where the value in making a prediction is that, well, really the value of prediction is that you're replacing humans to make predictions, not to make decisions. What you want to use is the power of data and the power of analytics, power of use cases, in order to allow the machines to give you predictions. Now, that increases the value of the complement, which is the human making decisions. Okay, so the decisions that we can now make, here's a prediction, and the platform's going to give you a whole slew of ways to optimize the outcome, because a prediction, maybe you're 30% likely to enroll in a university. I really want you to enroll in my university, so I want that to be 70%. So what are the tools I have at my disposal to increase that prediction from 30% to 70%? So the prescription is, hey, if I give you more money and I send you a particular marketing program and I call you on the phone, you're going to go from 30 to 70%. And I actually have the money to do that. Therefore, I'm going to maximize the probability by doing those 3 prescriptions. So when we think about advanced analytics, it's that prediction and prescription piece.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, so going off of a little bit of that that human aspect that you were just talking about, as Randy said, we're about to start our next set of classes next week, including one called Incentives and Information that focuses on market power, game theory, and asymmetric information. So my question is, how, if at all, do you integrate behavioral economics into these models that you create?
So you could ask me the game theory question. I'm sorry, I've been thinking about that one all day, so that's why I've been sort of in the back of my head, it keeps working. So behavioral data is the holy grail, right? Because at the end of the day, any company that uses these machines to understand an individual and their decision making really is looking for behaviors. We use a lot of demographic data because that's easily available, right? We know where you live, we know what your SAT scores were, we know what your GPA is, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't necessarily tell us why you're behaving the way that you are. However, we can look at different aspects of what you do to understand behavior. So, for example, the amount of time that you spend on the university's website, the pages that you click, give us an indication of are you behaving like somebody that actually would attend this university? Are you visiting? Right? What are you doing in your interactions and how you're behaving? If you liked messages we're sending you, then you're behaving in a way that says that maybe we're the place for you. It gets really tricky because that information in any industry is really difficult to come by. And a lot of people say, well, send out surveys. People lie on surveys. You really need to understand people's behaviors. And so what we get really good at is how do we take data that doesn't, or variables or attributes that don't look like they're behavioral and turn them into behavior. Okay, so what does that mean? So if we look at your change in GPA, if we're worried about retention, and we look at the rate of change, it's not the change. Because there's plenty of 2.50 students who end up being CEOs of company and people with 3.5s that end up bankrupt. But what we're looking for is how is your behavior changing, right? So if you have a decline in your GPA over a 4-semester period, that's a pretty steep curve. We know there's a problem, but maybe it's less steep, and you have a lot of financial aid and student debt, and you have 2 jobs, right? So somebody might not put all that together, but the machines can say, here's a pattern, we know this person's in trouble. Or the amount of time that it takes you to enroll in classes. Say that you're a student that typically enrolls in classes within 1 day of when classes open up, and all of a sudden it's now 3 days or 5 days. You typically wouldn't care about a student that took 5 days to register for classes, except you're a student that typically enrolls in 1 day. There's some behavior going on. So behavioral economics, behavioral-like variables are critically important. And somebody who knows how to pull that data out or those behavioral aspects out is gold. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I mean, would you say that you strive more to explain why behaviors happen, or just to use behaviors that you see happen to try to predict?
Yeah, we rarely look at. So here's the thing. So you have to look at variables like distance. So if somebody's close to the school, it could be a positive or it could be a negative. If somebody lives far away from the school, it could be a positive or it's a negative. Right? All we care about the outcome. Are you likely to enroll or not? So we're looking. So the combination of variables along, will tell us whether or not somebody's likely or not. So we're less interested as a company, not from an intellectual standpoint, but from a company standpoint, of understanding individual variables and what they mean, and more about how they impact the prediction and the prescription. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
All right, great. So, all right, so I'll turn it over to Spencer now for the next question.
All right, so building off of that kind of data kind of talk, when looking through all this data you collect, how do you decide what is important and not? And then also, how do you teach an AI to sift through all the information when it's not always apparent what the meaning is of the information? For instance, like a social media post, it could be a picture. How does it know that that means something towards your goal?
Yeah. So this is the beauty of machine learning, right? So we don't know. We don't know and we don't care. Why I say that is because the machines tell us what's important. The algorithms tell us what's important. This is a common question that we get from potential customers, and they say, well, how do you put weights on your variables? Like, what determines the weights on your variables? It's like, or what's the most important variables? It's like, no. The machines actually will tell you which variables are most important and how impactful they are to the individual. So, for example, if you looked at, we use, in terms of the decision of likely to enroll or not, we use what's called classification models. I don't know how familiar you all are with the different types of models, but classification models are basically asking a binary question. Will you enroll? Will this person enroll or won't they enroll? And the way machine learning looks at it is they say, okay, well, give me 10,000 people from the past who've either enrolled and not enrolled, and give me 1,000 variables about them, and I'll learn, the algorithm, I'll learn about whether the new person that you're feeding in, it looks more like a person that's going to enroll or more like a person that's not going to enroll. And so it's a nonlinear relationship. These are nonlinear models, right? So it's not like a correlation where you're looking at the relationship between two variables. You're looking at an individual and how all these 1,000 variables impact their decision. Do they look like how close do they look like the person that enrolled or didn't, using all those variables? And so the machines actually tell you what's important and what's not.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm looking so I wanted to transition now into a couple questions about, we've been talking about it a bit, but more specifically about Othot. And my next question was about prescriptive analysis, but I believe you touched on that a good bit to this point. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to turn it over to Gayatri for a question about student enrollment.
Hi, so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the factors that you consider. Like, I know that you mentioned distance and then, basically using the AI with a bunch of factors, but could you explain more about that?
Sure. So we, because we work with a lot of universities, we know generally call them the top 40 or 50 variables that are most important in terms of somebody making a decision to go to a particular school. And then we probably use, in general, a couple hundred different variables, so another 150 or 200 on top of that. And so when we work with an individual institution, we start them out saying, these are the 50 that we need. And then we'll take everything else, because when you build a scalable platform, it's insatiable. It doesn't care. You can feed as much data into it as you can possibly find. But we do know that is one of the important things about domain expertise, because building models without domain expertise is where you create a big gap. Because if you don't understand how the business works, you may miss something or misinterpret something or not build the product in the right way. So I think the best way to think about it is that we start with a core set of variables, expand that, and let the algorithms tell us, what's most important. But I want to make sure that I'm capturing your question. If I missed an interpretation, am I not interpreting your question correctly?
I think that was a good answer, because I think it's been covered in previous questions too. So thank you for answering.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and we're just starting this week in Professor Rigati's class, learning about how to decide what variables in a model are actually important, and which ones to keep, get rid of. So I think what you just talked about is hopefully something that we're going to get into later in this program. So okay, I'll turn it over to Josh for the next question.
Thank you. I was wondering, has the global pandemic significantly affected college recruitment, and in what ways? And have you had to manually change your models to account for this, or does the machine learning take care of that as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's had a huge impact. And it's really caused a lot of concern with both our customers and our prospects, because now all of a sudden, the number one question we get, well, your models don't work anymore because they couldn't have predicted this to happen. Well, that's not necessarily true. We can look at the way people are currently behaving versus the way that we would have expected them to behave while using the model. So we can predict this person should be, very likely to deposit, and yet they didn't deposit. Why is that? And when you look at that across a lot of different people, what you see is, that people who live far away and need money, so have financial needs, all of a sudden, and are looking at different programs, are all of a sudden not depositing like they did before. So what that enables our customers to do is very quickly narrow down into that group of students who typically would deposit and say, okay, we got to give more financial aid, because clearly this is an issue. That person's probably going to end up at a state school that in their own state, because it's cheaper and closer to home. How do we combat that? So you're allowing the machines, the algorithms, to understand how, again, people are not behaving as you would expect them to behave. So that's why, that even in a case of a pandemic, that these models are incredibly important, and you start to look more at aberrations from expected behavior than you are typically how you would look at it, say, okay, how do we maximize probability? Now we're just trying to say, why are people behaving the way they are, and how do we counteract that? That get to all the aspects of your questions, Josh?
Yeah, thank you. That was very helpful.
Yep, certainly.
All right, wonderful. So Natalie, would you like to ask your question about student impact?
Yeah. So I guess I was wondering, so your work revolves around, consulting higher education institutions, and, can directly impact students, at a very vulnerable time in their lives. And I'm just curious, what worries do you have given that responsibility, especially when you consider biases within data and in algorithms, and how your company is definitely very machine learning and AI heavy?
Yep. So yeah, this is a topic that I spend a lot of time on, really important to me and to the company. So technology is power. Power used in the wrong way can be very devastating, right? Technology used in the right way can be very liberating, it can be a solution to problems. And we spend a lot of time talking with the leaders of higher education and our customers in particular about understanding that if you want a diverse class, if you're looking to increase different populations and create an environment that matches what your local environment or who you want to teach or whatever, you can't just listen to the models themselves. You have to understand what your goals are. So if you looked at the overall performance of the model might tell you just to continue to enroll the same type of person with all the same demographics. That's a horrible learning environment. So what you have to do is you have to say, let me look across all these different aspects of the student body that I'm trying to create. And let's look at the individual probabilities related to each student, each of those segments. And each of them are going to require something different in order to bring them to the school. So at the end of the day, you're focusing on the highest probabilities across all those different segments. And therefore, that theoretically you should be enrolling the best shaped class that you're trying to achieve. What's really interesting to me is that we'll go to school and we'll work with them on retention. And they say, well, we want to take gender out of the models. We want to take race out of the models. We want to take income needs out of the models. And we say, no, you don't. Because the first thing you want to do is you want to learn about how those variables or those indicators are impacting your retention rates. So if you take those things out, you can't study or know if you have a problem. The first thing you have to do is diagnose where your problem is. And then you can start to think about, all right, so there's a very famous case with the Apple credit card very recently, where this is like in the fall of 2019. And basically what they did was they said, okay, well, we're going to have this new Apple credit card. And what they found out, because of the data set they used and the way that they used the models, that it was systematically giving women lower credit limits than men. You could have the exact same background, exact same job, exact everything, and it's getting lower credit rates. Why? Because the models were looking at history and saying, historically, we gave women lower credit rates. Why? I don't know. So, but the model continued to perpetuate that. Horrible, right? So they didn't take into account that the data could be biased, the models can be biased, the way you interpret them can be biased. This thing hit the market and it had these issues. We're talking about 2019. It's mind-blowing to me, but which just shows that we don't know, that generally not we, but generally the world doesn't understand how to tease and use variables in looking at bias in the data, in the models, and the interpretation. So Natalie, I can go on forever about that topic, but hopefully that addressed some of the questions that you had.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was very insightful. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, no. So I think to some, the first like logical solution to that would be to be blind to some of these things like gender and race in the models, just leave them out altogether. But you're saying that you've found that it's more beneficial to leave them in to see what the problems are. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, and then you can reset how you can either use the same models but use them differently, like segment the market so you're making sure you're getting the right diverse class that you're looking for, or you can build a whole new rubric. But you have to understand sort of where you have bias, because if you take a certain variable out, there's other correlating variables to that variable that you just took out. So you may not solve the problem just by taking a variable out of the equation.
Right. Yeah, no, that's incredibly interesting. Yeah, okay. So I wanted to transition now into a couple questions just about general career and industry advice for our last 15 minutes or so. So as somebody who has repeatedly built teams yourself, what are some of your top priorities you're looking for when interviewing and hiring in our field?
So I think, so it's a good question, but you threw me a little curveball when you said in our field, because I think I started at this level. I'm looking for somebody who has intellectual curiosity. I'm looking for somebody who can think with both the left side and the right side of the brain, right? So that you're quantitative, but you can tell stories. I'm looking for somebody who has a really good work ethic. That doesn't mean that you have to work 60 hours a week, but that you really want to work hard to get the, to solve the problems or deliver the product or whatever it is. And the fourth thing that I always look for is, are you a good person? Because life's too short, people. Don't work with people that are bad people. I don't care how good the job is. That you have to work with people that are, some say mission driven. That's fine if you want to call it that. I just want to work with people that want to do good in the world and want to, don't want to take advantage of others. And that's the beauty of being a CEO. I don't let anybody into my companies that doesn't check the box on those four things. So I think being discriminating in terms of, and if you find yourself in a situation where you're working with a company that has a culture that doesn't match those four things or whatever your four things are, I'm not saying quit, but I'm saying start to look for a new job, because life's too short to be in an unhappy situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Max now for the next question.
Hi there. So my question is that you've been involved in a lot of different kind of spheres and industries before, and right now you're in education. And my question is, do you have any intuition or guesswork as to what the next new big thing in terms of analytically driven business is going to be?
Yeah, so I think this is a fascinating question to me. I heard a lecture from, and I wish I could remember his name. It was last year. I was trying to remember his name earlier today because I saw this question. And I love the concept of creating a frictionless society. Frictionless society, right? So how do we make everything really, really easy? When, my car was in the shop and today, and my wife was driving me to go get the car, and she needed gas in her car. So we stopped and we got gas, and I was filling up the gas tank, and I was looking in. I got my invoice from the car shop on my phone, and it said, fill this out and you can pay your, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I just have to, and they'll have my car ready for me. That is frictionless, right? So it would be frictionless if all I had to do was put my thumbprint on there and then I go pick up but it actually made me turn my phone horizontal and then sign it, but it didn't work. So it actually made me angry, which is kind of funny. So, but my point is that the types of technology that enable frictionless and analytics and AI is going to drive a lot of that, right? So, there's a reason the next version, and they do it somewhat now, but of the Amazon recommendation engine is right now they'll ship you like staples. If you do the same thing all the time, they'll just ship it to you, whether you order it or not. They're going to start shipping you things that you don't typically buy. And their bet is they're going to match it pretty well, and that you're not going to return it if it doesn't match that well, as long as it's not too expensive. Which is frictionless. Well, I hate to shop. I don't want to go out and buy shirts. Thank God I have, my daughters and my wife are like, I got to buy you clothes. So for my birthday, I get clothes all the time, which is fine. But it'd be great if it just showed up one day. I didn't even have to go online and look at it. But I think but there's a cost to this, right? Because they need to know a lot about me, which means I need to be willing to give up my data. So there's two sides as we don't want to go down that other side because it can be a long discussion about privacy and use of data, et cetera, et cetera. But I would think about the opportunities is where do you spend time that you really shouldn't have to? And how do I use analytics to understand how I can accelerate or reduce the friction in transactions? So there's a lot around fintech. There's a lot about how people spend money that's happening right now that I think is going to be sort of the next big wave of analytics and AI. It's already happening, but even bigger.
Thank you very much. I was going to say, I saw that you wrote a blog post about the concept of frictionless society, and I think that's a very fascinating concept. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
All right, wonderful. Alyssa, I'll turn it over to you for the next question.
Thank you. Hi, so my question is about your time as an adjunct professor. That is something that maybe I will consider later on in my career. So I just wanted to know if you could touch on what are some of the things you have gained from this experience and what are some of the less glamorous parts of being a professor?
Wow.
It's all glamour all the time.
I knew, Randy, I was looking at you. I was hoping you'd say something like that. So quite frankly, I love working with undergraduates. I do teach a graduate course, but I love undergraduates because I used to have the saying, which I think is changing a little bit, but undergraduates, all they want to do is learn. And they have opinions, but they don't, it's based in nothing other than their imagination, their creativity, et cetera. They really don't have life experience. All graduate students want to do is challenge you, right? So especially I should say business students. So it's like you put forth the concept and next thing you know, for 45 minutes, you're debating whether or not the concept is even relevant. But I'm sorry, I went down a tangent. So what I love about teaching is that it keeps you young, it keeps you fresh thinking, it brings new ideas, it learns me about, I learn about technology, I learn about all the slang words that people use. I mean, I really feel like it's invigorating to me to be involved with young people as they're trying to explore different topics in different areas. I believe one of the reasons why I teach, and I teach fiercely, which means I feel like even though it's a part-time gig for me, I need to know everything about the topic. Not to say that I need to be the smartest person in the room, but I need to immerse myself in that topic and read everything that I can so that I'm familiar with it and I understand it. And I think when you teach something, you learn it at a different level than you would if you're just reading about something, or even in your job. When you have to teach somebody, yeah, I mean, and you really care about that, it really immerses you in that. And that gets to that intellectual curiosity piece as well. I think that those are the two main reasons why I enjoy it. What I don't like about it is I'm really bad. Like if I have a class that's the exact same class, I get bored after like 4 or 5 years. And it's like, even though you try and change it, it's like I hate the same thing over and over again. So I build a lot of project stuff into my classes so it makes it fresh and new. I think that's a hard part. If you're teaching something that's exactly the same, if you're teaching, if you only taught stats, 100 level for 10 years, that would be really tough. So I think finding ways to sort of shake it up is important. But maybe there was something, Alyssa, that you wanted me to comment on.
No, that was perfect. Whatever was specific to you. So thank you.
Sure, of course.
So I'm looking at some of the questions that came up in the chat. So I want to, before we wrap up, go back. I think Spencer had a great question earlier. He says, how has the core set of variables that you've looked at in your models changed over time?
Mm-hmm.
So what were things that were important maybe 4 or 5 years ago that maybe aren't as important now, if any?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we continue to add variables, and like when we first got census, we built a model, a database of census tract data that drives down to where somebody lives in their particular neighborhood, and we've coupled that with other data. So we've engineered data, and so it's understanding that it's important to have that type of data in the models to get more insight about them. So I think most of our data is constantly asking our customers for different types of data, for them to collect different types of data. And then again, the models, once you have a base data, base model, the models tell you whether or not there's any value in that data. Did it improve your predictions? We can measure a number of different ways whether your predictions or your models have improved in performance. So I can't think of any in particular right now other than what I would say are engineered variables in general, like I described with the behavioral type variables, like looking at the amount of time between, you know, when enrollment opens and when you enroll, and then these census type variables. So we're constantly searching for variables that might give you better performance. But again, you let the models tell you whether or not that's valuable data.
Yeah, no, that's very cool. I think that's very relevant to what we're studying and what we're going to be going into in our careers. So I thought a good question just in our last couple minutes to end on was if there's one thing that you wish you would have known when you were a graduate student, what would it be?
You know, I don't know. I really enjoyed graduate school. I was thinking back when I read that in the advanced work that you sent over. I mean, I was one of those, I don't know, I really enjoyed graduate work. I mean, because I looked at it as an opportunity to step outside of where I was prior to that and think about recreation. And even if you were in undergraduate before this or you had a job before this, I think you need to take a look at the time that you have in graduate school is, how do I want to recreate myself? And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean recreation in the big picture things. Well, maybe there's some of you that just want to completely change careers, or want to do something completely different. You wound up in the wrong undergraduate in your mind, et cetera, which I bet you 10 years from now you'll say, boy, glad I had that first job. But I think this concept of recreation can happen on a micro level. What is it that you want to improve about yourself? What is it, is there a particular topic that you want to become an expert in? Maybe you don't want to get a PhD, but you want to be an expert in something. Or maybe there's a competency that you want to build, and now that you have the time, well, yes, you're busy at school, but work busy is different than school busy. So maybe there's some aspect of your life that you want to improve. And I have a daughter that just entered into graduate school this year, and we talk a lot about these things. And she had a very rigorous job before she went into graduate school, and we talked a lot about, this is your time, right? This is the time to take a step back, to think, to let yourself explore different career opportunities. What is your passion? Again, ask yourself, what is your passion? I know that sounds very trite, but there are things that call to you that you really want to do. You got to listen to that voice. And again, it doesn't mean that you have to change everything. It just means allow yourself to open up, to move in that direction, right? Recreation does not mean blow yourself up, right? Passion does not mean that you need to go left when you're currently going right. It just means recognizing that there's a voice that's telling you to go in a certain direction, or something that you really love to do. It's, history used to be a big passion for me, and I never got to complete that when I was in undergraduate. But you know what? I'm really glad, because I read crazy number of books on history, especially the Revolutionary War period. And because I look at the start of the country as an entrepreneurial experience, I would never have gotten the perspective out of history that I'm now getting because of the life that I've led. And so it's just, I would just say, allow yourself to sort of flow wherever that those words, that passion or that little voice inside of you is going, just point yourself in that direction. I think too many people, I know I'm going to say this one more time, too many people think that recreation or that following your passion means completely blowing yourself up. It doesn't. It just means pointing yourself a little bit more towards whatever that is.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that answer. And I see it's 3:31, so I'll just want to thank you so much for being here. I think these career chats are super helpful to us, and especially pairing with our schoolwork is I think really incredibly valuable. So so again, thank you. Randy or Shannon, is there anything else you?
Can I just say something real quick before we turn it over?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, this is probably the best run forum like this that I've been in. So the amount of time that you all put into thinking about the questions, the way that you segmented them into different categories, the fact that you sent them to me ahead of time, but not too far in advance, that's actually a really good positive, because I can just read through them and let my head think. And I don't, obviously it's relevant to me, but it just is, it's a joy for me to be able to participate in this. This is, so burdens on this end, joy is on this end. I'm way over here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to spend time with y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Andy. And I guess we're going to talk next week about capstone projects, so we can find an opportunity for you to get